doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm doing okay. A little busy, but doing okay.
This is your busy season right now, guys.
Sure.
He was supposed to do a Zoom with us, but instead Zoom wasn't working. So he gets to pop in and wear your NBA TV polo.
Excuse my polo. I'm sorry.
No, we love
Feel
the
much
polo.
underdressed, but thanks for having me.
We love the polo, and you have a big show going on tomorrow, 4 hours right here on NBA TV, Free Agent Frenzy, which is going to be crazy. But let's start it out first with just what you're hearing. Paul George obviously opting out of his player contract with the Clippers. He plans on still talking to the Clippers, the 76ers, and the Magic. What do you feel like he's looking for?
So let me say this. First of all, if he would have opted in, this is the best case scenario for Clipper fans, because if he would have opted in, there was going to be a trade request soon to follow. I mean, we would have been talking about that like right now, today. And so him opting out gives him an opportunity to look at other fillers, the Orlando Magic, Philadelphia 76ers, as well as the Los Angeles Clippers. Now, the thing with Paul George, the holdup has been he wants a 4th year. And the Clippers gave Kawhi Leonard back in January a 3-year, $153 million extension. And I believe the Clippers thought that Paul George would fit his contract parameters under the same guidelines.
Yeah.
That hasn't been the case. That's been the holdup as of right now. So if Paul George continues with his demand of having a 4th year, there is a team out there that will give him that 4th year. And I'm talking about the Philadelphia 76ers. And so the Sixers are a serious threat to lure Paul away from L.A.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, Ryan. I want to get the GM's perspective on this one. When you're looking at a guy like Paul George, what are your expectations? And for a player like him, what is he looking for?
Well, at 34 years old, this is probably Paul George's last big contract, Lauren, and it's easy to say he should leave some money on the table to try to keep it together in L.A., but the reality is we're talking between $52 and $54 million in year 4, the 4th year that Chris was referring to. Philly has that. Philly has a very clean salary cap sheet, really only with Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey. They'll utilize his salary cap hold and then sign him after they do the rest of their business. So the 76ers are a contender. They have 2 stars that either under contract or they're going to re-sign, and they're going to be aggressive pursuing Paul George.
I'm still getting used to guys, opting out of $49 million. I'm still getting used to that, right? Remember, I played in the 90s, so these numbers are crazy. But I understand the business side of where we live in today, so now I don't get confused. So with that being said, if I'm PG, I know what I've gone through the last couple of years in L.A. It's been okay, some numbers and some excitement. But there's that guy in Philadelphia that's 7 foot that played really, really good. Maxey at point guard, young point guard that's playing lights out basketball. I think I might be looking at the city of brotherly love a little bit more and see if I get some of that love, if you will, knowing that I haven't won anything in L.A. Yes, Kawhi is great. Yes, I had Westbrook, all these great names, but I never got out of the second round, did I? So that's why I would look at Philadelphia a little bit more, in my opinion.
You have to remember, Paul George is from L.A., from the L.A. area. From what I was told, there's no bad blood. It's not a toxic situation.
No, you're right. I agree with you.
They know some of the same people. Yeah, so
it's just that you haven't won, Chris.
I get you.
And that's the point is that you opt out for the big business. You help the team create some cap space, maybe bring in someone else. But as a player, at the end of the day, I want to win. And at the day, we've talked to a lot of guys to get in their career. Yeah, I got a lot of money, but we walk in this building, especially across the hall, what separates our conversation? Winning, not the money.
It's going to be interesting to see what ends up happening. Free agency, obviously, starting at 6 p.m. Sunday night. Those conversations that he's supposed to be having kind of heat up tomorrow. But the team across the city, Lakers, LeBron opting out of $52 million in his last year of his deal, which is also another big number that's going on right now, to maybe take some lesser money to add another guy this year. What are you hearing about LeBron and his upcoming deal, maybe?
Well, I spoke with his agent, Rich Paul, CEO of Clutch Sports, and, he informed me that LeBron is willing to sacrifice and take less in order to open up a full mid-level exception slot for the Lakers in order to possibly bring in another key player. Now, here's the caveat. This is not going to, he's not going to do this for a marginal player, an average player. This has to be a star caliber player or a borderline star player that is going to be willing to take less, because that full mid-level exception, Brian, I'm mistaken or not, around $13 million?
Yeah, 12.8.
12.8. So that's for a star level player, that is a pay cut. And so I think LeBron's looking at it, listen, I'll take a pay cut if this incoming star will take a pay cut as well. Some names to throw out there: Klay Thompson,
Ooh.
James Harden. DeMar DeRozan is a name that the Lakers are intrigued with. I know that I'm pretty sure DeMar wouldn't want to take that type of a salary slot, but that's what LeBron James is looking for. If a player of that caliber doesn't come on board, I believe he would take his full max slot.
Yeah,
salary.
Ryan, what do you think about this?
Well, the Lakers are essentially returning the same team last year that flamed out in the first round. So they're putting a lot on J.J. Redick as a first-time head coach. LeBron has made $480 million in his NBA career. That's the most of any player all time.
A little bit of money.
He's the first active player who's a billionaire. He's done incredibly well off the court. So we'll see if he sacrifices. This would really be putting his money where his mouth is, or leaving some money on the table, I should say. And if they can get any of those guys Chris mentioned, I'll throw in one more. But if Chris Paul is available, somebody like that in that salary slot, I think, Lauren, that's the only realistic way they can significantly upgrade this roster, because they have so many players and so many contracts from last year back on the books this season.
Yeah, now Rich Paul's talking to me. Now we're talking about winning again. Because if you bring back the same team, you're not winning. Yeah. So you have to do that, LeBron, if you really want to bring in enough pieces that help you try to win another championship with your son on the bench. With your son on the bench.
Yeah, it's going to be crazy. And I mean, the fact that, Bronny was also drafted by the Lakers, they have the opportunity to play together. What a cool experience for LeBron and all of that.
You scared me there, D. Scott. You said that son of a...
The son on the bench, I was like, son on the, I'm still getting used to saying playing with my son. Son on the bench is like, it's just still,
okay.
That greatness is just huge,
I
man.
understand.
No.
Another guy that you mentioned is Klay Thompson, and for the first time in his career, he could be going out for free agency in 13 years, which is pretty crazy. What are your expectations for him when free agency hits at 6 p.m. tomorrow?
So remember I said the Paul George Clippers situation is not toxic, it's not contentious. That's probably the opposite of what's going on with Klay Thompson and the Golden State Warriors. I know firsthand that Klay is very disappointed in where negotiations have gotten to this point, to the fact that he's looking elsewhere. And in fact, I spoke with a few members of the Golden State Warriors. They believe that Klay Thompson is gone. Now, obviously, there's still some time for things to be worked out, but the Dallas Mavericks are a team that it will be pursuing Klay Thompson, as well as the Los Angeles Lakers. So, again, does Klay, or will Klay, I should say, take a pay cut and go to those pursuing teams? The Los Angeles Lakers, that's home.
Yeah.
That's a rival team of the Golden State Warriors. I know just from a competitive standpoint, that's something that intrigues Klay. But is he really willing to walk away from a salary? I believe the Warriors are probably offering him low 20 million type of contract. So is he willing to walk away from that because he feels disrespected? It looks like he is. And so that is definitely something to monitor.
The Splash Brothers are no more 3D.
Yeah, that would be something appeal real hard to swallow. I would think that he and Steph would have some type of conversation along with Draymond, knowing what those guys have built together over the last, 10 years to go to the promised land as much as they did. And I say it again, if it's an opportunity to go to L.A., knowing his dad was drafted by the Lakers and all that kind of stuff, and there's something to it, but I just won 4 championships with these two guys.
Yeah.
I want to make sure I have a good conversation with them before I walk away from them.
I know, it's going to be really interesting to see how everything plays out. Again, it all starts tomorrow night, Sunday at 6 p.m. Chris, thank you for coming on over. It was less than a week ago right now. Let's take a look at some of the biggest notes from the draft. Zachary Risacher selected first overall by Atlanta, the 15th international player to be drafted first. 3 of the top 10 players selected were French, the first country to have 3 players in the top 10 outside of the U.S., and 16th consecutive draft that a Kentucky player was drafted in the lottery. I know. Work on that French. What you got for me? Croissant. What do you got? What do you got, Ryan?
I got a nice Bordeaux, I think.
Oh, I like that.
Oh, okay.
He wins. He wins.
He's the best. He has a
We
bet
have
move
to talk
right there.
about some of the most improved teams, though, in the 2024 draft. I want to start with the Houston Rockets. Reed Shepherd drafted 3rd overall. How does he make the Rockets a better team? I feel like he fits in with their youth that they already have, the youth, but very, very good talent they already have.
I think he fits in very well with the Rockets' young core, Lauren. He can play either guard position, and at 52% from three at Kentucky, he was the best shooter in college basketball last year, the best shooter in this year's draft class. So he'll be able to do some things defensively as well. I think he'll surprise some people at UK with the amount of steals he got. He also blocked a number of shots as an undersized guard. So I look at Houston, who was among the worst three-point shooting teams last year, and I see him opening up a lot of space on the floor for their two young stars, Alfred Sengun and Jalen Green.
Yeah, it's going to be really, really fun to watch him play. Now let's get into the Jazz, because I feel like that's another team that got a couple really, really good players. They drafted Cody Williams out of Colorado, Isaiah Collier out of USC. But I feel like Cody Williams was one of those guys for the Jazz that they thought that maybe he was going to go top 7, and he was still available at 10th. And you kind of knew that maybe he was going to fit in with this Jazz team. What do you think?
Well, as JT likes to call him, flip. I thought Kyle slipping to the second round was a big steal, too, because another big body. You have, Markston, you have Kessler. The way the bigs now, if you can pick and pop and shoot the three like Kyle can, I think Danny Ainge got a big-time steal in the second half, in my opinion, Ryan. So, once again, Danny stayed there and it's kind of took his time and just picked his pieces all the way down the draft like he normally does. So, I was happy to see what the Jazz did.
Yeah. Okay, let's get into the Timberwolves, too, because last year in this playoff series, they were so electric in the Western Conference this year. Then, obviously, the Spurs draft a guy like Rob Dillingham, right? 8th overall, but then he was traded to the Timberwolves. How do you feel like he could be a good fit now in Minnesota?
I feel like he's actually the best fit in the draft going to Minnesota, because the Timberwolves need scoring. They need an infusion alongside Anthony Edwards of explosive offensive ability. Rob Dillingham was the best shot creator and the most explosive scorer in this year's draft, Lauren. And he also struggled some on the defensive end of Kentucky, but he's going to the best defensive team in the league in Minnesota, which is anchored by the Defensive Player of the Year in Rudy Gobert. The Timberwolves didn't have many ways to upgrade their roster. They're pretty locked in terms of their salary cap and lack of flexibility. So this is really creative business by Tim Connelly and company in Minnesota, trading a distant future first-round pick. We'll see how it is, Lauren, in the early 2030s, but they get a player now, an explosive scorer, to add to the core of a team that just had the best season in franchise history.
Lauren, are you telling me that Rob Dillingham had a chance for the next 2 years, 3 years to learn from Mike Conley? Arguably one of the best defensive point guard we've ever seen in our league. And now he and Ant-Man that's the back. Ant-Man's what, 22, 23?
22, yeah.
So you're talking about a 19-year-old who's very electric, to your point, Ryan. Now he'll be taught how to play defense better. I don't think he got enough credit on how he can facilitate and share the basketball. That's just lights out crazy to me that Ant-Man and Rob Dillingham is your backcourt for the future. Oh, my goodness, Timberwolves.
I know, and a lot of these guys we get to see at Summer League, which is 25 first-round pick via the Lakers and a 2027 first-round pick. Now, DeJounte, like you said, 3D, trades those peaches for those beignets, but he seems excited about it, tweets out NOLA, #504. I know he spent the last 2 seasons here in Atlanta, put up career highs in certain numbers, but it just didn't end up working ultimately between Trae Young and DeJounte Murray in the backcourt. Let's look at this from a Pelicans perspective and a GM's perspective. How do you feel like DeJounte Murray is a good fit with a guy like C.J. McCollum in the backcourt? Now he's playing alongside a guy like Zion Williamson. When healthy, we saw what he's able to do as well.
I feel like he's a really good fit, Lauren, because he can play either guard spot. We saw that here in Atlanta with Trae Young, and he's going to do the same thing, I think, in New Orleans with C.J. McCollum. He's one of the better defensive guards in the league. At least he was in San Antonio. We'll see if he can get back to that level in New Orleans. He's also on a terrific contract, a 4-year, $114 million contract. That was an extension he signed recently, actually, with the Hawks. Obviously, transfers with him down to New Orleans. So I really like this piece of business for the Pelicans. They get better without touching the core of their roster. They still have Zion. They still have Ingram. They still have C.J. McCollum. And now they add a borderline all-star in DeJounte Murray.
Yeah, and 3D, I have to say this, too, because the Pels VP of basketball ops, David Griffin, said there needed to be changes this summer and they need to get better. It's not going to be a summer of complacency, and they're making moves early.
Making moves early, obviously, the first thing is you got to figure out a way to keep Zion healthy. And then what does that extension look like? Ryan, help me out with Ingram. He can extend this summer, right?
Yeah, he's extension eligible now. He makes $36 million and is in the last year of his deal. So I think it's very important the Pelicans get him locked in.
So you keep him locked in. Now you still have your two centerpieces, Ingram and Zion. Now you have your veteran and CJ still doing what CJ does. and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but it was times in that fourth quarter, even when Zion was healthy, they still needed someone else on the floor. I love my guy, Trey Murphy III. He played lights out basketball. But I just think DeJounte will give another person to break down the defense to take some of that pressure off of Ingram and Zion.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens over the next coming months with Brandon Ingram. But now let's look at it from an Atlanta Hawks perspective, because you have a guy like Trae Young in your backcourt. You bring in a guy like DeJounte Murray to play alongside of him. What do you feel like the Hawks do now, or where do the Hawks go?
I think Atlanta has to be careful, Lauren. They can't completely bottom out, because keep in mind, over the next 3 years, they still owe either unprotected first-round picks or an unprotected pick swap to the San Antonio Spurs. Those were the things they sent out in the deal to get DeJounte Murray from San Antonio to Atlanta. Murray's now gone, but they still owe those assets to San Antonio, so they need to try to stay as competitive as they can. One of the things you never want to do if you have a bad year is hand your draft pick to another team. So I think Atlanta is not going to try to be in the Cooper Flag sweepstakes in the top of the 2025 draft. I imagine they're going to try to win as much as they can to stay competitive.
Yeah, win as much as they can. Right now, they finished last season 10 games under 500. Going to be interesting to see how the 24-25